Sam C. Hey guys, we got story time with TrailBot. And today, let's see, I guess we've got the Moth Part 4. And what are we doing? Well, we's cruising around the Sal Mountains, and we're going to head back down towards the Dewey Bridge where we's camped. And we're going to leave this pavement and cruise around on some dirt roads for a while. So let's get to where we had left off on this story. We had a couple of scientists who were having a contest as to who could outdo each other. And I think one of the guys was really sick, but that's not where we're at. Where we're at is that a Hapley guy is looking at a microscope because, you know, he's all trying to get his attention refocused on something other than Pawkins. So right now he's got a microscope and he's going to it. So he was only dimly conscious of the bright side of the instrument, the illuminated part of the tablecloth, a sheet of notepaper, the foot of the lamp, and the darkened room beyond. Suddenly, his attention drifted from one eye to the other. The tablecloth was of the material called tapestry by shopmen, and rather brightly colored. The pattern was in gold, with a small amount of crimson and pale blue upon a grayish ground. At one point the pattern seemed displaced. There was a vibrating movement of the colors at this point. Hapley suddenly moved his head back and looked with both eyes. His mouth fell open with astonishment. It was a large moth or butterfly. Its wings spread in butterfly fashion. It was strange it should be in the room at all, for all the windows were closed. Strange that it should not have attracted his attention when fluttering to its present position. Strange that it should match the tablecloth. Stranger far that to him, Hapley, the great entomologist, it was altogether unknown. There was no delusion. It was crawling slowly towards the foot of the lamp. New genus, by heavens, and in England, said Hapley, staring. Then he suddenly thought of Pawkins. Nothing would have maddened Pawkins more, and Pawkins was dead. Something about the head and body of the insect became singularly suggestive of Pawkins, just as the chess king had been. Confound Pawkins, said Hapley, but I must catch this. And looking around him for some means of capturing the moth, he rose slowly out of his chair. Suddenly the insect rose, struck the edge of the lampshade. Hapley heard the ping and vanished into the shadow. In a moment, Hapley had whipped off the shade so that the whole room was illuminated. The thing had disappeared, but soon his practiced eye detected it upon the wallpaper near the door. He went towards it, poising the lampshade for capture. Before he was within striking distance, however, it had risen and was fluttering around the room, after the fashion of its kind. It flew with sudden starts and turns, seeming to vanish here and reappear there. Once Hapley struck and missed. Then again. The third time he hit his microscope. The instrument swayed, struck, and overturned the lamp and fell noisily upon the floor. The lamp turned over on a table and, very luckily, went out. Hapley was left in the dark. With a start, he felt the strange moth blunder into his face. It was maddening. He had no lights. If he opened the door of the room, the thing would get away. In the darkness, he saw Pawkins quite distinctively laughing at him. Pawkins had ever an oily laugh. He swore furiously and stamped his foot on the floor. There was a timid rapping at the door. Then it opened, perhaps a foot, and very slowly, the alarmed face of the landlady appearing behind a pink candle flame. She wore a nightcap over her gray hair and had some purple garment over her shoulders. "What was that fearful smash?" she said. "Has anything—" This strange moth appeared, fluttering about the chink of the door. "Shut that door," said Happily, and suddenly rushed at her. The door slammed hastily. Happily was left alone in the dark. Then, in the pause, he heard his landlady scuttle upstairs, lock her door, and drag something heavy across the room and put it against it. It became evident to Happily that his conduct and appearance had been strange and alarming. Confound the moth and Pawkins! However, it was a pity to lose the moth now. He felt his way into the hall and found the matches. After sending his hat down upon the floor with a noise like a drum, with the lighted candle, he returned to the sitting room. No moth was to be seen. Yet once, for a moment, it seemed that the thing was fluttering around his head. Happily, very suddenly, decided to give up the moth and go to bed. But he was excited. All night long his sleep was broken by dreams of the moth, Pawkins, and his landlady. Twice in the night he turned out and sauced his head in cold water. One thing was very clear to him. His landlady could not possibly understand about the strange moth, especially as he had failed to catch it. No one but an entomologist would understand quite how he felt. She was probably frightened at his behavior, and yet he failed to see how he could explain it. He decided to say nothing further about the events of last night. After breakfast, he saw her in her garden and decided to go out and talk to reassure her. He talked to her about beans and potatoes, bees, caterpillars, and the price of fruit. She replied in her usual manner, but she looked at him a little suspiciously, and kept walking as he walked, so that there was always a bed of flowers, or a row of beans, or something of the sort between them. After a while, he began to feel singularly irritated at this, and to conceal his vexation, went indoors and presently went out for a walk. The moth or butterfly, trailing an odd flavor of Pawkins with it, kept coming into that walk, though he did his best to keep his mind off it. Once he saw it quite distinctly, with its wings flattened out upon the old stone wall that runs along the west edge of the park. But going up to it, he found it was only 2 lumps of gray and yellow lichen. "This," said Happily, "is the reverse of mimicry. Instead of a butterfly looking like a stone, here is a stone looking like a butterfly." Once something hovered and fluttered round his head, but by an effort of will he drove that impression out of his mind again. In the afternoon, Happily called upon the vicar and argued with him upon theological questions, that sat in the little arbor covered with briar and smoked as they wrangled. "Look at that moth," said Happily, suddenly pointing to the edge of the wooden table. "Where?" said the vicar. "You don't see the moth at the edge of the table there?" said Hapley. Certainly not, said the vicar. Hapley was thunderstruck. He gasped. The vicar was staring at him. Clearly the man saw nothing. The eye of faith is no better than the eye of science, said Hapley awkwardly. I don't see your point, said the vicar, thinking it was part of the argument. That night, Hapley found the moth crawling over his counterpane. He sat on the edge of the bed in his shirt sleeves and reasoned with himself. Was it pure hallucination? He knew he was slipping, and he battled for his sanity with the same silent energy he had formerly displayed against Parkins. So persistent is mental habit that he felt as if it were still a struggle with Parkins. He was well versed in psychology. He knew that such visual illusions do come as a result of mental strain. But the point was, he did not only see the moth, he had heard it when it touched the edge of the lampshade, and afterwards when it hit against the wall, and he had felt it strike his face in the dark. He looked at it. It was not at all dreamlike, but perfectly clear and solid-looking in the candlelight. He saw the hairy body, and the short, feathery antennae, the jointed legs, even a place where the down was rubbed from the wing. He suddenly felt angry with himself for being afraid of a little insect. His landlady had got the servant to sleep with her that night because she was afraid to be alone. In addition, she had locked the door and put the chest of drawers against it. They listened and talked in whispers after they had gone to bed, but nothing occurred to alarm them. About 11, they had ventured to put the candle out, and had both dozed off to sleep, then woke with a start and sat up in bed, listening in the darkness. Then they heard slippered feet going to and fro in Hapley's room. A chair was overturned, and there was a violent dab at the wall. Then a china mantel ornament smashed upon the fender. Suddenly the door of the room opened, and they heard him upon the landing. They clung to one another, listened. He seemed to be dancing upon the staircase. Now he would go down 3 or 4 steps quickly, then up again, then hurry down into the hall. They heard the umbrella stand go over, and the fan light break. Then the bolt shot, and the chain rattled. He was opening the door. All right, we're not going to finish this one today. We'll finish it next time, though. Thanks so much for coming along, Samsy. And we'll give you just a few seconds of big old Rosie, because that's the way we roll here at Samsy.